I did do a lot of reflection at that point and kind of thinking about what, if I'm not going to focus on teaching music, what do I want to focus on? Kind of what does feel more creatively fulfilling? What feels more creatively exciting at this point? I don't plan what a poem is going to look like at the end. I don't plan what a drawing is going to look like when I'm done with it. It's really just starting with something that is exciting to me, whether it's a phrase or a word or a color or an idea, and then it just sort of grows from there. So I thought that was kind of cool that mirrors how I've explored all these different things in my life too. That sort of beginner's mindset that comes up, I think, whenever we try a new medium or a new way of doing things, which I think is really valuable. And intellectually, I know that it's good for me to try new things, and I can't be good at everything right from the start.
Hi, I'm Claire, founder of Creativity Found, a community for creative learners and educators, connecting adults who want to find a creative outlet with the artists and crafters who can help them do so, with workshops, courses, online events and kits. For this podcast, I chat with people who have found or refound their creativity as adults. We'll explore their childhood experiences of the arts, discuss how they came to the artistic practices they now love, and consider the barriers they may have experienced between the two. We'll also explore what it is that people value and gain from their newfound artistic pursuits, and how their creative lives enrich their practical, necessary, everyday lives. For this episode, I'm speaking with Maria Ramsey, who I've caught at a reinvention stage, having made the decision to stop teaching music and to explore other avenues that feel more creatively fulfilling. Hi Maria, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Claire?
I'm very good, thank you. Now, you have a number of creative feathers to your bow. Which would you say are your main creative outlets currently?
Currently, I would say that my main creative outlets are drawing or visual art and poetry and floral design. Those are the ones I'm focused on now. There are many others that are in the background, like you alluded to.
Yeah, brilliant. Were creative activities something that was encouraged in you as a child, at home and within education?
It definitely was, and I'm very lucky to have that. My family was very much a creative family, or a family that valued creativity and the arts. So I spent a lot of my childhood making arts and crafts and playing music. Both my parents are musicians, so I did a lot of music growing up. My grandmother's an artist, so it's definitely very much a part of my upbringing.
Yeah, and what about within the school environment?
In the school environment, it was encouraged as well. I definitely felt a little bit pushed towards music in school and less so towards the visual arts. It was kind of hard to do both just because I think that the arts were not as valued in the school system. Even though my teachers individually were supportive, it was hard to actually fit those things into your schedule, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so how did it show itself musically then? What were you doing?
I took lessons outside of school. I studied violin and piano. Those were kind of my main instruments, and I sang. And then in school, we didn't have an orchestra, so I joined the band because that was kind of the musical option. So I played flute and then French horn and then a little bit of trumpet in the school band.
Wow. So a bit of all sorts. That's
Exactly.
amazing. Did you get the chance to continue with music then? What happened when you finished high school education, for example?
I went to college afterwards, and my family really encouraged me to do liberal arts for college, which I did. And I had no intentions of studying music or majoring in music. But everyone around me was not surprised in the least when I ended up majoring in music. So that's what I spent a lot of my college years doing as well. And then after college, I ended up teaching music for several years, which was not the plan.
Right. I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
That wasn't the plan, or there wasn't a plan at all, and things fall into shape. You said liberal arts. What does that mean?
That means basically an education that involves a lot of different subjects as opposed to focusing on one thing. So, like, if I had chosen where I wanted to go to school at 18, I think I would have gone to art school. But my parents wanted me to have a broader, well rounded education.
Mm, I can see that. But if you wanted to go to art school, why do you think you kept being pulled musically to that side?
That's a good question. I think, and I'm not exactly sure, but I think part of it is I did take a few art classes growing up, and I did try to take one in college, but none of the art classes that I had really resonated with me. I think I didn't love maybe the style of art that we were being taught to do, or I didn't feel like I was having a good mix of gaining tangible skills and being able to express myself. And the music always just felt really natural and easy to me. So I think I always just kind of ended up being drawn there. And since I had studied it so much and spent so much time developing those skills, it was just really easy, I guess, because I was already really good at it.
Yeah. Was it enjoyable?
It was enjoyable. I think what I really enjoy about music is playing music with people. I think that creative collaboration is really satisfying. And now what I do with music is a little bit more informal. It's more just like playing with friends for fun. And I really enjoy that. But I think when I was so focused on classical music, which is what I was doing growing up, that's what all my teachers kind of encouraged me to do, it felt a little bit less creatively satisfying. It was still, I love classical music. It's very meaningful to me. I think it always will be, but it wasn't as creatively satisfying in the sense that all the notes are already written out for you. There's a lot of creativity to the interpretation of it, and I really admire that in people who are really invested in doing that, but that's just not the level at which I was interested.
Yeah, I can completely understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you kind of fell into it actually as a means of making money. How did that happen? How did that falling into it come about?
My mom's friend offered me a job when I graduated from college, and I had no other plans. Like you said, there really was no plan. My plan was that I don't want to do music professionally, but I didn't have an alternative. So, since that was a skill that I had really cultivated, I was very easily offered a job. And then that kind of snowballed from there. Once I was teaching in one place, other schools started asking me, other people who already knew me, who had played music with me, started asking me to teach at other places. And it really became much bigger than I intended.
And did you find teaching suited your personality? Because oftentimes people will say, I have a vocation, I want to be a teacher, so I train to be a teacher. Whereas you've come from the loving all of the arts that you love. And then teaching does become quite a good way for musical people to make money. Presumably, this is youngsters you're teaching as well, is it?
It was mostly youngsters, although I did have some adults and high schoolers as well. So, and I have always really loved children, especially, and I like teaching, and I think I am kind of suited to it. But similar to the focus on classical music, it wasn't really fulfilling that creative side of me. It was a different skill set that I think I do have, but it wasn't something that I was really invested in developing those music teaching skills, especially when it came to the technical side. Like, I was really interested, I think, in the understanding how people's brains worked and how they were thinking about music and that side of it. But the, like, this is the proper way to finger the C major scale or whatever, and you're not allowed to do it this other way. I didn't like that.
Yeah, I hear that a lot with teachers in all sorts of subjects. It's about ticking some boxes of how a child should have learnt such and such a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And it just feels a little bit constrictive, I think.
So how long were you doing that before you realised that perhaps this wasn't what you wanted to continue doing forevermore?
I ended up doing it for about 5 years, and I think I knew far before the 5 years were up that it wasn't really my thing that I wanted to do forever, but there were other reasons I was having a hard time letting go of it. I think the relationships for one. But about 5 years in was when I decided to actually make a change and try something different.
And do you think, was there a catalyst for that, or was it just a build up of maybe now's the time?
I think it was a combination. I did have this interesting experience where I was driving to work one day when I was teaching and feeling like I didn't want to do it anymore. I just wasn't feeling like a great fit. And then I kind of heard this voice that prompted me to start looking for something else. This voice that told me I was going to get a different job it was like really weird and specific. In like 2 weeks from now, someone's going to call you and offer you a job. And it made me feel better. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll do that. So it was really more of an intuitive catalyst. So there was that. And then I also just had this intuitive feeling that if I didn't intentionally take myself out of this situation, I was going to be removed by a force beyond my control. And at the time, that sounded really stressful. I was like, I don't want to be fired. Like, I don't think I would be. I'm not doing anything wrong. But that was also right before the pandemic happened. And that was when I stopped teaching. So I would have been removed by something beyond my control if I had continued teaching. So that was kind of a wild experience.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so what did you think you were going to do instead, and how did you go about doing something?
Well, I ended up, so the car journey, basically that plus this meditation that I did ended up leading me towards floral design, which is one of the things I ended up doing to make money after I was no longer teaching. So that was interesting. I did do a lot of reflection at that point and kind of thinking about if I'm not going to focus on teaching music, what do I want to focus on? Kind of what does feel more creatively fulfilling, what feels more creatively exciting at this point. So I got a little bit more disciplined at that point about getting back into my drawing and poetry and these other things that I had always loved but had been kind of neglecting for that time that I was teaching.
Okay. You've mentioned writing as well, which is really interesting. It just keeps going. There's just so many things.
It's a long story that could go in many directions.
Brilliant. No, it's brilliant. So when you talk about drawing and writing, what are you drawing and writing?
I have been drawing a lot of plants, and one of the things that kind of got me back into drawing in a more disciplined way, that also discipline sounds sort of boring, but also in a way that I have a project that I'm excited to get back to as opposed to little one-off things. I guess that's why the discipline is meaningful to me. One of the reasons. I had been studying Feng Shui also, and I started drawing these images of plants that I was familiar with. I'd also been studying herbalism. So I was starting to notice these connections between the plants that I was learning about and the Feng Shui concepts that I was learning about. And I was drawing these images that kind of represented these Feng Shui concepts and plants coming together with the intention of them being something that I could put up in my home, or someone could put up in their home with a specific Feng Shui intention, like to invite in a particular type of energy. So I got into drawing plants in that way. And then the floral design too kind of reawakened my love of flowers, which has always been something that's important to me too. And I've been drawing a lot of flowers as well, and kind of gotten back into that.
That's really interesting. You dropped in the Feng Shui and herbalism there as well.
Yeah.
But what I do like is the way that you're connecting them all as well, and they're all coming together. How did you get into Feng Shui and herbalism?
The herbalism I had always been interested in. When I was younger, I used to look through this reference book on herbs that I had requested as a gift for fun, and like plan out things that I wanted to make. And so several years ago, I worked on an herb farm part-time over the summer, which was a really lovely experience. And then that kind of encouraged me to study herbs a little bit more deeply, because I was finding a lot of value in that relationship with the earth and with the plants. And so I ended up studying herbalism with a teacher who's local to where I live, and studied with her for a couple years, which was really wonderful. And the feng shui, I was always kind of interested in that as well. I've always been interested in spaces and kind of our environments around us. And I actually ended up connecting with one of my feng shui mentors because we have a friend in common, and she was looking for a virtual assistant at the time. So that's actually one of the things I started doing as I was transitioning out of teaching as well, as I started working as a virtual assistant for this feng shui practitioner. And then I started working for her and her business partner as well in their feng shui school. So after I'd been working with them for a little while, they offered me a spot in their feng shui certification, which was really lovely and generous. And I learned so much. So it's all very organic.
Yeah, what I love about this is that you are obviously open to things that come your way, and then things do come your way. Like you said, I was a VA for a bit, and I did some floristry for a bit, and it's like things come about. Okay, I'll give them a go, and it takes you on to other places as well. I really like that attitude.
Yeah, it's been a very rewarding attitude, and I think more exciting than planning everything out in advance. And I realized actually that's kind of how I approach the creative process too. I made this connection in my head recently, that the way I approach my creative work too is I don't plan what a poem is going to look like at the end. I don't plan what a drawing is going to look like when I'm done with it. It's really just starting with something that is exciting to me, whether it's a phrase or a word or a color or an idea, and then it just sort of grows from there. So I thought that was kind of cool that mirrors how I've explored all these different things in my life too.
Creativityfound.co.uk is the place to go to find workshops, courses, supplies, kits and books to help you get creative. So if you're looking for your own Creativity Found experience, go have a browse to see what's on offer so far. And if you can help adults to find their new creative passion, please get in touch on social media or through the contact details on the website. Tell me a bit more about the poetry then. You're letting that flow and that come out. And I'm also kind of thinking about, do they relate to each other, all of these elements of your creativity?
I think they do. The poetry in particular feels very connected to the music for me, because the kind of poetry that I like to write is very focused on rhythm and rhyme. And I think that for me, that really is an echo to my musical self. And so I kind of got back into poetry again during this time when I was wanting to get back into the things that I wanted to do creatively as I was transitioning towards moving out of teaching. And I started writing poems that my intention was to write a children's book of poetry and to illustrate it. So that's another way that the poetry and the drawing could go together, as I like to illustrate my poetry sometimes. But that was my intention, was to write a children's book, a collection of poetry. And I wrote a lot of poems with that intention. And then over time, I started writing some other types of poems that wouldn't necessarily make as much sense in a children's book. I started writing sonnets, which, again, it's like very much about rhythm and rhyme. It's a very specific rhyme scheme and rhythmic scheme that you're working with, which has been really satisfying. And then I've written some other poetry as well that it has, I think, still that childlike quality of wonder and playfulness, but is maybe not meant specifically for children. But in all of the writing that I do, I think a lot of it is very nature focused. So it kind of brings back the herbalism and the Feng Shui, these like cycles of nature that we're all a part of. I feel like they all also kind of have this theme of playfulness and self-trust, which for me is kind of a thread going through all my creative work.
Yeah. What I want to know now is about other people seeing what you're doing. So I'm hearing a lot about your journey and your experiments and what's coming out of you. Are you showing this to other people? Are you doing this for other people? How is that side of things going?
Yeah, I do share my work. I think the most active place that I share it now is my newsletter. I have a website and a newsletter and an Instagram where I'm sharing these things. And I've written some poetry for people, which has been really fun and something that I want to explore more. I find that really satisfying to write poetry for people. And yeah, I've done art for people too, some commissions, and then also some drawings that I sell online.
Would you like to do more of that? And how do you feel you would be led that way? Like, would you be taking commissions, or would you feel uncomfortable to take commissions because you want to do your thing? Do you know what I mean?
I think so. And that's an interesting question. I feel like you have caught me at an interesting moment in my path, like you mentioned earlier, where it is kind of, I'm sort of in a reinvention stage at this moment, I think, where I'm exploring what those next steps might look like. I think it would be the direction I see myself moving in now would be something that's a little bit in between a commission and totally something that I created. So I think it would be like the poems that I've written for people that I really enjoy are poems where I've asked people for a bit of a prompt. So I've asked people, what's your favorite plant? And then I've asked them, what's your sun and moon and rising sign in astrology, kind of to give myself a little sense of like what they might be hoping for, looking for, yearning for. And then I've kind of written a poem inspired by those things that they've given me, using this plant and using this knowledge about them. So I kind of see it as maybe it could be an intuitive process where I'm starting with something from the other person rather than taking a specific order from the other person, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What about music in all of this now? Does that play a part?
I think so. I think music will always be a part of me because it's something that I focused on so much for so many years, and it is really, really meaningful to me. I have done some songwriting, which has been really satisfying. And I think that that is one way that music can fulfill that creative need in the way that I want to express it. And then I also do really enjoy playing music with people. So I have a friend I like to get together with, and we'll sing and play and harmonize. So I think more of that in the future is what I'm moving towards.
Yeah. And how do you feel overall now with and I know we've said this is a bit of a transitional stage anyway, but thinking back to where you were when you went to college and you ended up studying music more than you thought, and the life that you had when you were teaching, how do you feel about your lifestyle now, and what there is to look forward to in relation to where you were when you had got yourself into this teaching situation, which had its kind of parameters around it?
I definitely feel like I'm in a much more explorative stage right now, which feels like a contrast to teaching, which it really did have specific parameters around me. Like you said, I was kind of boxed into a certain way of teaching that didn't necessarily feel quite right. So I definitely feel like at this point in my life, I'm allowing myself to explore and play and dive into those interests in a way that I don't think I was giving myself the time and space to do when I felt so busy and overwhelmed with teaching responsibilities. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, definitely. No, I do understand. Did you ever have, because there's a lot of things that you're dipping your toes into, have you ever had any doubts about trying things, any fears about some of the things that you've tried, or even about some things you may not want to try in the future?
I think I do sometimes have fears, not so much about trying new things, but when it comes to being like feeling like I'm not good at things, that sort of beginner's mindset that comes up, I think, whenever we try a new medium or a new way of doing things, which I think is really valuable. And intellectually, I know that it's good for me to try new things and I can't be good at everything right from the start. But sometimes, as somebody who has achieved a certain level of proficiency in some of my creative pursuits, it can be hard, I think, to put myself in those positions where I feel unskilled, because it's frustrating. I like want to skip ahead to the part where I'm good at it, but I know that's not the point and it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Because not that it's, but it is, yeah, I think sometimes those kind of things will stop people to try it because they want to be at the good stage without the bit in the middle. But the bit in the middle is obviously a very important part of the process of trying new things. And I think sometimes
Right.
you can try something and be a bit rubbish at it, and then try it. Well, you can't be rubbish at it. You might feel you're not as good at it as you think you should be, and you could try again a few months down the line and find, actually, I enjoy this more. I feel better about this now. Do you have any plans or thoughts on any other activities that you might want to try in the future?
Great question. I feel like there are always new things that I want to try. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge for me, more than being afraid of trying new things, is not being overwhelmed by all the things that I want to try, because there's so many things that are fun and exciting and interesting to me. I've been really interested in interior design lately too, which, when you asked at the beginning what creative pursuits are kind of active for me right now, that one actually is quite active because we moved a couple months ago and I've been having a lot of fun kind of applying my visual art skills and creativity to a 3D space, and also applying the Feng Shui skills to this space. So that's been really fun. I would love to get into some other mediums too when it comes to visual art. I do a lot of colored pencil and a little bit of pastel, but I would love to do more pastel, kind of explore that more deeply. I would love to paint. So I think, yeah, there are lots of things.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much. How can people connect with you?
They can find me on my website, thephilosophers.com, and I have on my website, you can enter your email and get access to a free workshop about setting up your creative workspace, which does involve some of those kind of interior design ideas plus some feng shui tips to kind of set up a creative workspace that feels really aligned and supportive. And that gets you on my newsletter, which, like I said, is kind of the most consistent way where I'm sharing my creative thoughts and expressions. And then I'm also on Instagram at The Philosopher's Stem.
Brilliant. It's been so interesting to speak with you today, Maria. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me and going down this path of many creative pursuits with me.
This winding path.
Yes.
That's still going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Creativity Found. If your podcast app has the facility, please leave a rating and review to help other people find us. On Instagram and Facebook, follow @Creativity Found Podcast, and on Pinterest, look for @Creativity Found. And finally, don't forget to check out creativityfound.co.uk, the website connecting adults who want to find a creative outlet with the artists and crafters who can help them tap into their creativity.